Hello, everybody. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and today I'm inspired to share with you a very special story that's close to my heart about the calling of a sacred clown. And so it was back in 1998, the summer of freedom. And there was this one special evening where, as the sun was setting, a friend of mine and I walked up the hill there in Flagstaff, out past the hospital, and then up past the neighborhoods and into the hills. And as we got to the hills and we stood there beyond the neighborhood, we stopped. There was a fork in the road, so to say, and my friend decided he was going to go back. And in that instant, I was struck with the notion that to keep going. You see, I had a intention percolating within me for about 7 years or so to have an evening out, somewhat of a vision quest, if you will, and even a mini one, but just being out in the wilderness alone and, seeking guidance, seeking connection. And that's great. My wife just texted me just now, and she said she just sees a huge bald eagle out from the window where she is downstairs. So that's awesome. That's a great blessing and a sign at this very moment as I'm sharing this story. So I was overcome and in myself, today is the day. And I said, I'm going to keep going. And I just had a hoodie on and my shakuhachi flute, and I went tearing up the hills, chasing the sun, and hoping to get higher and higher and get to the place where I could enjoy the rest of the sunset. And I ran and I climbed, and then I climbed up this kind of cliff, and then up over that cliff there were these big rocks, and I had arrived at this beautiful place where I was going to spend the night. And I sat and I looked out at the great expanse and just marveled at the beauty that was before me. There was these great big monsoon clouds way off in the distance, taking up the width of the horizon, these big, billowy, beautiful clouds way out there though. And I was so excited for this moment. I was like a kid on Christmas morning. It's like, oh wow, the Great Spirit opened the door. Tonight is a special night for me and the Creator to bond, and me to go deeper within myself and discover something. I was full of anticipation that surely something wonderful would happen, and that I would receive some kind of revelation, some kind of gift from the Spirit. And so there was still like a little bit of light left in the sky. And hey Allison.
Oh, hi.
I'm recording a video right now.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. And then surprisingly, the clouds started getting closer and closer, to the point where suddenly it felt like, because I realized there were clouds behind me as well, and it was like this ring of clouds that was coming, in closer and closer, kind of, it felt like it was spiraling in and closing over me. And just before it got dark, it began to sprinkle. And and then it started raining more. And it was so unusual because usually the monsoon season in Arizona, it comes, it builds up during the day into the late afternoon. You might get some rain, and then it clears up by around sunset and you have a clear, starry night. But tonight it was totally opposite. And it rained and it rained and it rained all night long. And I remember, laughing to myself. I went through so many different emotions. But as the rain persisted, and I was squatting, against the back, with my back against this rock, just like trying to scooch into the scantiest little bit of shelter that I could, find. And I had this drip on my hoodie, drip, 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 and through the whole night, eventually, it really drenched my whole hoodie. And I remember there were some times there where I was going a little crazy, and I felt like a madman, rocking back and forth, and I really started to question, and I felt like, man, this is really awful. And I felt like the Creator almost played a trick on me, and I was thinking, gosh, you knew this was going to happen, and you got me all excited. You brought me up here. I've been waiting to do this for 7 years, and is this what I get? Is this how much you love me right now? So it was very humbling. And then there was fears that came up. There was even one moment where I stepped out into the rain, and I invited the lightning to strike me. And I don't know, maybe it was a twist of frustration. It was a twist of just feeling unworthy, and perhaps I was getting punished, and it was almost, in some way, perhaps it was a little bit of a challenge too. Perhaps it was also a little bit of arrogance and just my ego just fighting against what I was going through. And then I was squatted back up against that rock, rocking back and forth, and we're going all through the night here, hours of this, just constant. And so I had this thought, and it was getting colder. Now I'm all wet, it's the night. And I was like, oh, my Lord, have mercy. I probably have a couple more hours of this. And it felt like a moment, an instant after I had that thought, man, I have a couple more hours of this, that suddenly I saw the first lightning of dawn. And I stood up encouraged, because whoa, right when I thought, I had so much longer to go, it was okay, wait, the sun is about to come up. It's starting to come up. Then I stood up, and I started to walk and step out, and the rain slowly slowed down to a little sprinkle, to a trickle, just a couple drops, and it was done raining. Rained after raining all through the night. And so I was up, I began to walk, and I was welcoming the dawn as the light crept in and started to slowly get brighter. And I walked down into the valley behind me, and I took off my hoodie and I hung it on an old stag. And then I walked up the valley and then back up the hill, and then I walked into this meadow that it was surrounded by trees and forest, and then there was this beautiful green meadow, and all the way across the meadow was this monolithic rock that stood singularly there. And I walked across the meadow and I crawled up on that rock and I turned around and I sat down and I looked with my eyes open. I was seeing the sun shining through the trees and glistening off the dew of the grass, and I saw a deer slowly come across the far end of the meadow. And it was amazing, the contrast, where now I just felt like, wow, everything actually seemed like more beautiful than it ever had before. And that was amazing. After going through that night, feeling actually to the point of feeling forsaken by God in the midst of that rain. And now I was just feeling like this exuberance, this blessing coming in, this light-filled awareness. And then I continued my journey, and I rested again on the side of this hill, just kicked back and just relaxed. And then I continued my journey on down to the road, and I ended up hitchhiking back into town because I got spit out of the forest way further away than when I started. And so that was that wild night. And so here the capstone of the story is coming, where that was in 1998, and then it was the year 2000. In December, I was in California, and I was called back to Flagstaff, and I was going to nest up with Allison, who's now my wife, and she was pregnant with our first child. And when I joined her there in Flagstaff, I found this book in the house called Black Elk Speaks. And I read this book, and it was a wonderful, wonderful read. And I highly recommend it to anyone if you haven't read it. But there was a certain part in the book where it was talking about how people knew that they were called to be a sacred clown. And I might share a little bit about what a sacred clown is, but it's also something you can investigate further on your own. But the way they described that a person knew that they were called to be a sacred clown was that the thunder beings would come and visit them and make everything really dark. And it would bring up a lot of emotions, and it would bring up a lot of fears, and that the person may even feel forsaken. And wow, this is all starting to sound very familiar. And then, after the thunder beings did their work on the person, with their presence, with their rain, with their thunder, with their lightning, they would leave, and then the person would experience that everything would suddenly appear more beautiful than ever before. And they would experience this totally opposite. It's almost like going into that dark place and processing all of those different fears and feeling cut off from God and feeling forsaken by the Creator is essentially like pulling back the bow to have the person appreciate more fully the beauty of life and the blessing of life. And that is really precisely one of the main jobs of the sacred clown in a society, is to help people lighten up, to poke fun at this world of opposites in which we live. And boy, in this time, in our society and in this world, that is a gifting that we need now. It would almost seem like more than ever, because we're so vulnerable to be pulled into these narratives that bring us into a place of polarization and conflict with people that don't see things the way that we do. And we begin to take ourselves a little too seriously. And it starts, and it can darken a room. And so, anyway, this is the story of how I was called to be a sacred clown. And it's one of those things that I'm still living to find out, what it's all about. But it's, at the very least, it's comforting to think about that story, and it just helps me to remember what is really important and what really lasts, and it helps snap me out of this world of opposites, the illusionary dimension of this dream we call life, and to remember our eternal nature, to remember what's really important, and to act that out in a way that is a blessing to others, and to shine light, and to bring laughter, and to bring joy, and to remind what's truly important is the love and the grace that we extend to each other, and the embrace, the unconditional embrace that we embrace each other with, trusting that as we nurture ourselves and each other, we will blossom, we will grow, we will experience the beauty of life, the joy of life, the truth of life, and we can celebrate that. And so, thank you all so much again for being here, for all that you are, and for all that you will become. I salute you, I bless you, and make it a wonderful day. We'll talk to you soon.